So I'll start with an introduction. As it says, my name is Betty Chan. I am an authenticity life coach, and I primarily enjoy doing this work with first generation code switchers. And we'll actually have some time today to dig deeper into what we mean by code switching, and why I've chosen that as a way to identify the folks that I love supporting as well. But the work that I typically do as an authenticity coach is helping us actually find those places where we've armored up in our life and we've kind of hidden away who we truly are, and how do we find that safety and that clarity and for ourselves to be able to put that armor down so we could truly embrace who we are and start showing up as ourselves unapologetically, either that's at work, in a meeting with a client, or on your first date. Whatever it is, this is something that actually goes across all corners of your life. So that's a little bit of me. I would say, just on the personal front, I also identify as first generation. I'm an only child and a caretaker. I've been sharing a bit more that I'm also a survivor of a PIP. So it's something that we'll have a few more talks around in the coming weeks as well. And yeah, I just want to swing that back over to you, Ashmi.
Thanks, Betty. Yeah, so I'm Ashmi Patel. I'm a life coach for undiagnosed and late diagnosed ADHD women. And I like to, like, when people ask questions like, tell me a little bit about yourself, whatever. In a nutshell, I like to say that I'm wildly curious, easily excitable, a deep feeler, and a constant daydreamer. I feel like that kind of sums up who I am
Yes,
and
that
what.
sounds like you.
And so, yeah, I'm also first gen like Betty, first gen child of Indian Americans. Well, I'm an Indian American. I'm a child of Indian immigrants. There we go. I got that right. And I like to coach people out of survival mode, burnout, and overwhelm so that they can get closer to a life of ease, space, and choice. And I like to say I'm all about soft accountability and slow journeys. So when I'm talking to potential clients, I always give that caveat that, like, if tough love is the way for you, um, you might not, it might not be the right journey for us, because I'm going to be the one to give you grace and encourage you to give yourself some more grace as well. And yeah, I'm just here to help folks, especially women who are late or undiagnosed, figure out how to unmask, which is why like today's topic is really important to me, and learn how to live their life the way that they want after decades of just like trying to fit in through these like productivity hacks or just like masking parts of themselves. And yeah, I like to help people figure out what it's like to have an interest based brain and design a life around that. And so, yeah, so that kind of leads me into today's topic and why we picked it. So, we always like to give context before we dig in. And this topic of how to show up as yourself and authenticity. Well, Betty's an authenticity coach, so I ask her about this all the time. I'm always like talking to her about it. And then I coach ADHDers, and being authentic for, neurodivergent folks is a journey, as
Mhm.
and even other intersectional identities that we have. Like, if you're part of any sort of marginalized group, at some point in time, you are told that a part of you doesn't fit in or belong. And so we learn to mask or code switch in order to survive and thrive. And that's why Benny and I kind of picked this topic, because we talk about it a lot. Our clients talk about it a lot. We just see that a lot of people, when they come into adulthood or mid adulthood, all of a sudden have this aha moment of just like, I have been hiding parts of myself that I no longer want to, or just like no longer have the energy to. And
The
as
blessing of
life,
aging.
exactly. And as life coaches, we do this work with folks a lot. We're on the journey ourselves. And so we just wanted to come on here and talk about it and get other people's thoughts on what they feel authenticity is, what's helped them, what's hard for them. And so I'm just going to kick it off with the first question, Betty, for you, which I ask you all the time, but now you can share with everyone else, is what is authenticity to you? What does that mean?
Yeah. And I remember when you asked me the other time, I was like, wait, I am an authenticity coach, but why is this question so hard for me to answer as well? It's because I think the answer is just it's so big for me, but at the same time so simple. And I'll start with the simple side. Like authenticity, simply put, is just I see it as being real and being honest with how we interact with the world around us. Right? That's either the relationships we have at work or at home. That could be opportunities we have around us as well. Like, are we being honest and are we being real when we are in those interactions? And I think in order to do that, there's so many like sub steps behind it that most of us don't realize. I definitely didn't for a very long time. And it takes like being true to our own values and needs in order to show up honestly. And if we take another step deeper into that, it requires for us to be true to our own values and needs, it requires us to be honest with ourselves and being able to make that distinction between the values that were passed on to us versus the values that are actually ours. So I this always makes me think back to just being a child of immigrant parents. Like there's something we do all share as first generation folks, right? This the hard work mindset, for example, being one of them. That could be a value that some of us have. But at the same time, we can also gain new values as we grow up and come into our own identity as well that might come into contention. Using one from my own experiences, I value hard work, but I also value comfort. So, as you can imagine, those two things can come to head a lot as well. But ultimately, the thing I really want people to hear when they hear the word authenticity is a sense of freedom that comes with true authenticity. And knowing that when you are being authentic, like I start to see it as a gift that we give to the world, right? Like you're going to be one of the people that we don't have to dance around and play guessing games and be passive aggressive with because you have yourself figured out. You can articulate your needs clearly, you can advocate for yourself. And I do consider it a gift that like you have yourself figured out and it makes you an easier and better person to be around as well. So that's how I've been defining authenticity. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Ashmi, I'm curious for what about you?
I mean, we have a lot of overlap. So I think as I kind of
Mm,
answer this, there'll be a lot of repeat because I agree with everything that you said. And I think for me, like the freedom part that you said, I was just like, absolutely. Like,
mm,
I agree. I think for me, I'm thinking of like a timeline of like, like past, present, future. And for me, authenticity is when you can show up as the same person in all of those places and not do this like second guessing thing of like, how should I show up? Oh, why did I show up that way? Like, where it doesn't feel like
mm,
a choice anymore. Like, you know yourself well enough and you have the self awareness of like who you are, and you're able to show up without it having to be this choice of like what pieces of yourself you bring along.
yeah. Yeah.
And then after you show up that way, you're not doing the thing because I'm sure a lot of people can relate of, and I talk to my clients about this a lot of the aftermath, almost the vulnerability hangover of like, why did I say that? Why did I do that weird thing or
Mm,
whatever? Or
mhm.
like taking someone's comment like really personally and feeling it for a really long time. And when I think of authenticity, I think of freedom from that inner
Yes.
voice that is just always, that always has something to say,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
allowing yourself to know yourself well enough to be like, that, I don't need that. I showed up the way I wanted to show up, and that was me.
Yeah. I appreciate the elaboration, like, what does that freedom actually feel like, right? Because the thing sometimes I have a tension with the word authenticity is when it comes to consistency, do we have to be the exact same person all the time in order to count as authenticity? And also just like the relationship to showing up as a version of ourselves that might not be the best version we dreamed of ourselves for the moment, right? Maybe we're in a fight with someone and we want to say we're a level-headed person, but maybe we're not in that moment. And how do we contend with those experiences where we feel a little bit of like an outer body experience of like, oh, that wasn't me. Like, what happened there as well? And having that grace and freedom to not question, but just like get curious, as we say, like in the spirit of curiosity, like what was in that space that made me show up the way I did? And do I want to continue doing that as opposed to feeling a sense of obligation of like, oh, well, now I'm going to see the in laws and I have to show up this way. Now I'm going to go into an interview and I have to show up this way. That automatically really like causes us to armor up and not really be authentic, not really connect with the people around us.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're listening in and you're able to like hop into the chat, I'm curious what your definition of authenticity is. Like, I love to hear, because everyone, it's like natural that we're all going to have different definitions for what authentic is because it looks different for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, pop it into the chats. We want to hear what you think authenticity is, even if it's a working definition, because like Betty said, it's going to change. And
Yes.
I'm
Ask
just
me tomorrow. It might change again.
exactly. I'm pretty sure it might change from yesterday to today. And yeah, and so in thinking about that, we wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about code switching and like what we mean by that, because I think that that's important as we will be like using that term in here. So Betty, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've kind of touched on it a bit, right? Because it's hard to talk about authenticity without immediately touching on what are those things that keep us from doing that, right? I feel like authenticity is one of those things where it feels a conundrum like, hey, I know who I am who I am, but why is it so hard to continue to be who I am? And I do think code switching is one of those things that we do and we've learned as a survival skill for so long that we don't often check ourselves or even realize we're doing it. And I appreciate you asking this to spend some time because similar to authenticity, everyone's going to have a slightly different flavor of this definition. The original source of code switching is from a language base, right? So just being able to switch between languages. But since then, I've used that term a bit more expansively to also go like, are you switching not just your languages between Spanish to English, Cantonese to English, because you're first generation in that sense. But also, just are we switching how we posture in certain rooms? Like, who are we pretending to be? Do we stand a little differently? Do we have a certain voice that we use when we answer phone calls or when we show up in interviews? And eventually, I think if we do it enough and it's left unchecked, that code switching starts to affect how we think and we start to self police ourselves in terms of what is good behavior and what is not good behavior also. So it can get pretty deep, but I think just simply I would say code switching, the way I intend to use it is there's a version of ourselves that we show the world and there's another version that we keep to ourselves and how like the flipping the switch of back and forth between the two. Yeah. But Ashmi, I know you've used other terms as well in addition to code switching, right? Especially in the ADHD context.
Yeah. So I use masking as
Mm.
my like term of choice. I will kind of use code switching and masking interchangeably, but for the most part, I would say the neurodivergent community is much more familiar with masking, which is just this concept of hiding, and I almost want to say like suppressing parts of ourselves or like
Mm.
habits or things that we do in order to like fit into society, like whatever's like societally accepted.
Mm.
And um and what I've learned recently is that a lot of the things that we mask are things that our body does naturally to regulate, are like a
Mm.
regulating action. And so like, you know, like we stim a lot, which is why like fidget toys and things are really helpful because we need that extra stimulation. So there's like lots of different ways that people with ADHD will stim, and a lot of those are seen as like disruptive when you're in public.
Like fidgeting with a pen all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, or just like have, you know, or like clicking or making any sort of sound or whatever that is regulating your system. And so if you think about having to suppress something that your body needs to regulate, you're obviously going to just build up a higher level of dysregulation by having to suppress that.
Mm.
And especially for those of us that are undiagnosed or late diagnosed, that dysregulation is going to compound over years and years and years and turn into severe burnout.
Mm.
And so I started answering what I talk about code switching and masking and led to this, but that is why I use the term masking, because in our community it is used a little more often than code switching. But
Mhm.
I usually mean the same thing when I'm talking about them. And yeah, I clearly have a lot of feelings about why we have to do it and the fact. And I really love helping clients and myself learn how to unmask and just,
Mhm.
use the fidget toy, whatever's like within your safety realm,
Mm.
sneak those into your everyday and allow yourself to maybe like drop your shoulders and relax into yourself and
Mhm.
just like be more regulated.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're touching on something we'll definitely get to today, which is like, what are the costs that come when we
Mm.
stop being who we truly are? And also, thank you for giving me permission to do my little fidgety during this talk, because yes, I resonate a lot with the ADHD community because of just like the need to, yeah, your body needs to do something and we don't have to question it, allow it to show up as is. When we start to question it, that second guessing that you mentioned earlier, Ashmi, is like, I think that's really the tension and the discomfort of like, we are ourselves all the time. We should be ourselves all the time. But why does it feel so damn hard to do it? And I actually want to pull up Dr. Maria Prado's comment just now. I was eyeing it of like just bilingualism, but also just like the second part of what you mentioned. While I remain true to who I am, others see a different
Mm.
person. So this is what I mean by like the conundrum of like that consistency, right? I don't mean authenticity is like you have to be the strict version of yourself all the time. Being authentic can be having different variations of you. We are multifaceted people, and that's okay. But when you're showing up in these different spaces, do you still feel consistent to who you are? Do you feel consistent to your values? Are your needs consistently met? Because I think at the end of the day, most of us crave authenticity when we say it. The underlying thing that we're looking for is a sense of safety and belonging and acceptance. Like we just want to be accepted for who we are and what we're showing up with in the moment. And that can change from minute to minute, room to room, relationship to relationship as well. So I just wanted to bring that up briefly. But I mean, Ashmi, you and I have known each other for a bit. And as you mentioned, we're still on our own journey of like, how do we get comfortable staying and being ourselves, even if that does look a little different from moment to moment. And it's something we talk about behind the scenes, and you all get to get a little sneak peek on, is being in front of a camera is very, very testing in terms
Mm.
of, am I showing up as myself right now? Which I think every moment of since this live has started, there's been this little bit of like this subconscious checking that I'm doing with myself. Like, Betty, are you forcing yourself to sit too upright? Are you trying to keep this pen out of the camera view, etc.? Because I'm trying to look presentable, right? As opposed to I'm someone who is just here to be curious with everyone, and I just want to figure out where do we get stuck with authenticity and have a pretty open conversation around it as well. So I guess to put it into question, because I didn't actually ask you a question, Ashmi, is where do you still feel like it's challenging for you to show up authentically?
I could talk about this all day, so I'm gonna try and keep it short, which is, as if you're new to this, can be a struggle for me. So, and if you're not, you know that I like to talk. So, the reason I could go on and on about this is from the perspective of somebody who is undiagnosed, late diagnosed ADHD. When you get your diagnosis, or just like have the realization that like I think I'm neurodivergent, have ADHD, so much of your life starts to make sense. But then you
Mm,
have this like, it's a little bit of a crisis of like all these things that I thought were like my quirks or my personality now have a reason, which is like my ADHD, which doesn't like take it away from me. But then you almost start to be like, what is me? What is the ADHD? And you like have to like
mm,
come to terms with that and figure out, those things. And so like for me, a lot of times what got in the way was like me trying to fit into whatever situation I was in, which was always really hard for me. And the way I would do that would be like, without knowing it, I would do like a study of the room, a study of the environment, a study of the people. and then just like fact gather and then figure out like how I am supposed to show up, right?
Mm.
And as you were talking, like being on camera, all these things, I had this like all these like flashbacks of things that I have like muted for most of my life, which is when I introduce myself, why I lead with my excitability. So for the longest time, I would have felt like having this kind of wallpaper and flowers in the back and a pink shirt and whatever all would have been seen as like unprofessional. People wouldn't take me seriously.
Wow, it
To
feels like such small
like,
things, right?
yeah, but I would have been like, I was always the youngest, and I was the youngest in the room for about like by like 20 years for the beginning of my career, and I would just be like, what are all the things that are going to make somebody not take me seriously? And
Mhm.
if you think about that, that just like sanitized me to become like
Ooh, that
quite
word.
a just like just like a
Yeah.
shell of myself because all
Yeah.
like and like in your mind you're like don't come off as too bubbly and don't like smile too much, all the
Mhm.
things that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. And so for me, I think what got in the way was my and at times it was a need to just try and fit into my surroundings.
Mhm.
And in the process, you see a lot of things that are said about like who doesn't belong. And then when you have those things, you're like, cool, that means I can't bring it out, right?
Mhm.
So just like when I was a
Yeah.
kid, I wouldn't take Indian food to school, like all the things, because you're like, well, no one else is bringing non PB and
Mhm.
J lunches, so like I can't be the one. And
I'd be so mad if we lived in a world where there was only PB&J sandwiches. I love a good PB&J, but yeah, it's like we keep out variety, we keep out parts of what feels more familiar to us to keep the majority comfortable. Yeah.
yeah, and so I feel like what gets in the to like sum up my answer, I think what gets in the way is a combination of my inner critic feeding off of what the data that it can collect from the real
Mhm.
world of
Mhm.
finding
Mhm.
places and things that are said about what parts of you belong and are acceptable, and then essentially editing myself according to that information.
Yeah. And like I imagine that editing happens so automatically, right? Because again, we get information of like someone has a comment about someone else, like, oh, I can't believe that person wore a pink shirt onto the live. And then we start to feel like, oh, even though I love this
Mm-hmm.
pink shirt and the pink shirt is a big part of who I am, like I'm not gonna wear it. I'm not gonna allow it on screen because someone else said that it wasn't acceptable or someone had a judgment around it as well. Hmm. Yeah. That's definitely a way that it gets very sneaky in terms of how we start to learn the mechanisms of code switching also. I think I do this probably still in the speed of my talking. Like, I'm sure a lot of you noticed when I came in the beginning, I still do this with every time I get on a stage or in a workshop. The first, like, 10 minutes is, like, me being, like, a full-blown New Yorker. I'm talking at, like, a million miles per hour, and I have to learn to, like, slow myself down because I am someone who naturally actually thinks a lot in my own head before, and every time someone mentions something, if you see my eyes like expand a little, this is what's happening in my brain. You said something very profound to me, and then all these implications blow up in my brain, and then I have to like reorganize and gather myself back to one point so words can come out of my mouth and reply to people. But I recognize that when I did that in professional settings, taking that time to be like, let me think about what we're talking about in this question right now, that it made other people think that I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't just leadership enough because I wasn't shooting at the hilt all the time with my answers and opinions. And I'm someone who just doesn't want to do that. If I already know something deeply as an expert or I'm really passionate about it, you might find that experience of me. But most of the time, I'm someone who prefers to slow it down. But the compulsion to speak quickly is my form of code switching in any sort of public speaking forum to then just make sure people think that I belong here because I have something to say versus just believing that I have something to say and I deserve to be here anyways.
Mm, yeah.
Mhm.
And that, I feel like the nuances that we both have like started talking about, like even when you were like the New Yorker and me, and you know, I'm curious like what other norms and societal expectations,
Mm,
I was going to say get in the way of our authenticity, but I'm going to say influence because they don't always get in the
mm,
way. Sometimes,
yeah.
depending on what it is, it can actually encourage you to be more authentic if you have like actually found that third place that you belong in or whatever. So
Mm,
I'm going to
mhm.
say influence, but yeah, how would you, or like what would you add to that? Because I think both of us have already talked about a few things already.
Yeah. Definitely for me, the ones that come quick to mind are workplace norms, right? Like do not share personal feelings. You cannot cry at work. You have to speak very quickly and be opinionated to be counted as a leader. Like all these unwritten rules of how to show up in a professional context, I've had to shed a lot ever since I become my own in terms of building my own business. Like I started, it took me probably a whole year to realize, hey, I'm still living by these rules and norms, and it's affecting how I show up with new relationships that have never met the old professional me, but it's now becoming my first impression to new people in my life. And I was like, you know what? I have an opportunity to actually start anew and to present myself the way I truly feel I want to be presented, which is a little gentler, warmer, and more
Mm,
patient as a person. And having to actually do the work myself to be like, okay, being a tough, resilient person and being a gentle person can both actually exist in the same place, right? Because for a long time, I think this probably came from a younger age of just like, don't be so soft. Oh, it definitely did. Thanks, mom. Mom's voice is coming to my head right now. It's like, don't be such a pushover. Don't be a softie. People will take advantage of you. But at the same time, like don't tell people what you're good at because then they'll take advantage of you. So there's all these like confusing ways of like, okay, I got to protect myself, I got to put my guard up and behave a certain way, and that's what I mean by that armor that we put on as we go out and face the world. And I think that's left me into this, like I'll learn that influenced me in one part of my life of like don't be gentle, and then you go into the professional life, especially in the American work context of like, oh, well, congrats to Betty for working through the weekend and pulling an all-nighter to get us through to the finish line, which is great. But I'm still someone of the opinion of like, please don't applaud someone for staying over hours. Like that's not the hard thing that they're doing or the value that they're giving. That actually should be an invitation to be like, what's going on here, especially if there's a repeated pattern. But those behaviors started to teach me of like, oh, hard work is like to a point where you're pushing yourself to the point where you ignore your body and your needs. Like I would not go
mm,
to the bathroom, I would skip lunch all the time, and just those started to compound into this belief of like I have to be a hard, resilient workhorse in order to be valued, in order to be accepted and belong in places, rather than, oh, there's actually a world of people out there who will find my gentle approach a breath of fresh air. And actually, that's a space that they want to be, but they don't find often because most of us are taught to be very like hyper efficient, hyper productive people. And I always think that makes sense. Like, I'm not trying to judge that. If we're spending 40 hours of our week in a work context and that's the stuff we allow ourselves to swim in and be immersed and influence us, then inevitably it's going to be part of how we think and how we act as well. But just taking that conscious moment to check and keep checking with ourselves, like, oh, is this how I want to be? Like sometimes I pride myself in doing it still, but other times I'm like, you know what, I'm going to choose a gentler way to move through my day, to move through my relationships, and that is perfectly okay.
yeah. Yeah. I as I was listening to you talk, I had this like meta moment where I was like, I feel like we can even zoom out more to just like what parts of the story and what parts of the truth we choose to like share and
Mhm.
elevate. It's like even just in like media, pop culture, all those places,
Mhm.
the parts that were like, oh, like this is great, or like this leader, their journey is always the like the resilience and the grit and like how hard it was for
Yeah.
them and they like climbed their way out and whatever. And now they're like at the top and they're top
Yeah.
dog. And
Mhm.
it's like, but what about the like just like we get it. He started in the garage and now he's like this rich person. But like no one's talking about how he felt when he was in the garage and how that had a lot
Mm.
like there was like a lot of feelings, or nobody talks about how like how you make other people feel or how you feel about yourself in any of these situations. We just
Yeah.
elevate this like, which I think comes from capitalism, this idea of like the product at the
Mhm.
end that you get, or like what
Yeah.
gets you to a lot of money and success.
Mhm.
And so in there is like no talk about what authenticity is or how or whether or not they were able to authentically be in that journey, right?
Yeah. And actually in that example you gave, it's like there becomes a growing pressure. As you might start off doing the thing you love in the garage, not to Steve Jobs, or myself. Like I started doing furniture flipping during the pandemic in our garage as well. And it starts from a place of like expansive enjoyment and we're doing it for ourselves. But as we get successful, as we get better at what we do sometimes and we start sharing with people, the arc that you just mentioned made me realize that there's also this growing pressure that now I have to fit into this
Mm-hmm.
version of success. So I can no longer have self doubt. I can no longer make mistakes. I can no longer second guess myself when those like second guessing is just kind of part of being a human being sometimes, right? So it's like, did you suddenly become a robot in your success as well? And I think that's I see that as one of the costs of like when we stop showing up as ourselves. But sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, no, that was great. And it also makes me think, what was I thinking? I just lost it. This is part of being authentic.
This is part of being
Thoughts
authentic, folks. We're
thoughts
like,
leave you.
where did our thought
Um,
go?
well, it'll come back. But
Yeah.
I have lots of thoughts on like what is the cost of not being authentic and what
Yeah.
does it and like a question I ask my clients all the time is at what cost, right? Like
Mhm.
you want to show up this way or be or do this thing or whatever. Or not even you want to. You feel like you should. It's generally where it comes from.
Mm,
And
mhm.
or have to. And I'm always just like, at what cost to you will it be to show up that way?
Mhm.
And that's when I think about this like compounding burnout, this just years and decades of muting parts of yourself or whatever. And I think if you sit down and think about how much energy it takes to hold back part of yourself than to just show up,
Mhm.
it's a
Mhm.
lot more energy. And if you do like a little energy audit, you're just going to run out of
Yeah.
juice really quickly. And then you'll be running on fumes, which will then lead to burnout. And so to me, like, I'm like, well, the ultimate cost is burnout, but also just feeling like a shell of yourself or, I think Marta earlier said sincerity based and integrity. And right, like
Yeah.
if you come home at the end of the day and you just feel like you almost like let yourself down because you didn't allow yourself to show up the way you wanted to,
Mm. Yeah, we're
that
so worried about letting everyone else down, but we also can let ourselves down too.
and the feeling of letting yourself down repeatedly is not
Yeah.
great. And it
Mhm.
does stuff to your spirit that takes a long time, I think, to
Yeah. Yeah.
recover from. And I feel like that got kind of dark, but I do think that that is the cost of not allowing people to show up authentically. Is
Yeah.
it it strips us of our joy and our sparkle and our essence, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the stuff that makes life exciting and worth living.
Yeah. And I would even put that in, I don't know if it's accurate to categorize it, but they feels more like the hidden costs. Because I think
Mm.
when it's happening to us in the moment, when we are consciously or unconsciously giving up our authenticity and taking action. I don't want to say choice because not always doesn't always feel like a conscious choice where we're not showing up as ourselves. The costs feel a little less inconsequential. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not going to say what's really on my mind, but like I'm going to maintain the peace in the room and like that's fine. I don't get my opinion heard one time. But I hear your point of like when there's that repeated action of like, oh, well, if every conversation you're going through, you're trying to maintain the peace of the and like the camaraderie of the room and you won't say what's truly on your mind I think the thing that a lot of my clients realize that hits that point of like, oh, this is the rock bottom. Like I can deal with all of that, but I can't deal with the fact that I am now, like, I'm now sacrificing, like, I'm hiding myself from the world completely, and I don't exist in this version of the world, right? Because they've been pretending to be someone else for so long that it's like, okay, I'm now 20 years old, I'm 30 years old, I've been doing this for
Mm.
50 years of my life, and who am I now without having to regurgitate my resume? Who am I now without having to say that I am a mother or I'm a father or I'm a caretaker, right? Like not giving ourselves a chance to explore the different facets of who we can be starts to. I, I'm saying this now because I'm like, great. I just took that dark thread that we're talking about and where I'm going with it. I'm doubling down on it because now I'm talking about grief, right? The grief of who we
Mm.
could have been had we showed up ourselves more often. And this is not to say like slap on the hand for all of us who might still be in that starting phase of like, oh, I'm now recognizing I haven't been myself for a long time, but I want to be. Just not to say you should punish yourself for not allowing yourself to show up for that long, however many years, but just to be gentle with yourself because there will be a bit of a grieving period once you decide that, like, okay, I do now want to show up as who I am. I don't want to hide my thoughts. I don't want to hide my opinions. I don't want to hide my pink shirts and my wallpapers and my clicky little pens that I need to do. But there's always going to be this little bit of a thought in the back of my mind of like, oh, well, does that mean like I've like wasted my life for the last 20 years of pretending to be this polished person that's incapable of mistakes and just like, whatever it is that shows up for you is what comes to
Yeah.
mind.
I also want to add, for most of us that haven't been showing up authentically, that's what was taught to us. That's what was told was okay. That's what
Hmm.
we
I was
did in order.
encouraged. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was probably a survival mechanism in a lot of ways. And so if you are feeling like, oh, like I wish I could have, we get that, but like maybe it wasn't as safe as
Hmm.
it should have been for you to show up, right? We're not always in an environment that encourages people to show up authentically. And I think that's the other cost that I was thinking of is like if you're not showing up authentically, if you are a leader or if you do influence other people, you
Mm,
might not be creating a place for them to show up authentically either.
yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like we're all influencing each other. And so, and I think about things that have helped me. If you're okay, I want to kind of transition into like strategies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, because that made me think of things that have helped me start to show up more authentically, and it's by surrounding myself by people who do it so that I feel safer too and I'm
Mm,
inspired to, and I just see like, oh, like they have so much ease and joy because they're just showing up, like I want that. And so
mhm,
it's like, oh, like I can have that too, or I can get closer to it. And that, um I feel like just seeing what is possible is a really great way to influence yourself and others.
mhm. Who's is there someone in your life or some space in your life where you do feel like you're more encouraged to be authentic?
Is it really corny to say you?
It's not a plug. No. Okay, other than me. Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate
I
that.
will say I will say since becoming a life coach, I have met a lot, like the coaching community that I have been able to create
Mm.
has definitely led me to meet people that like allow me to be myself. And also like the ADHD community, like once you find people like that, it's
Mm.
just really it's a really great place because you can see things in each other that you're like, oh, like, that's great.
Mhm.
And you also just like feel like you don't have to constantly explain yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
I don't have to do the thing where I'm like, I'm gonna interrupt you. I'm not being rude. It's just because my brain works really quickly and I'm gonna forget it. Or, like if you tell me a story, I'm gonna share a story of myself. I'm not trying to center
Mhm.
myself. That's how I tell you that I'm relating.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
like things like that. And so I would say those are two places that I have found community and I have found I think for me it's like joining other people that are also doing the work to show up authentically. And so
Yeah.
it's easier to see someone trying and like root them on and be like, hey, I saw you do that thing.
Mhm.
It was great. Like keep it up.
Mhm.
And when you're building a new muscle, that's nice. Like you need that encouragement.
Yes. Yeah, you definitely do. And I think generally like that is a good strategy, right? Like just finding the models in your life. And I need that all the time too. Whenever I'm trying any new skill, I'm like, I just need to see someone do it and recognize
Mm,
that they're fine afterwards. They didn't die. And then I get to do it. And then I'll realize I didn't die. And then we can keep going from there. Cause it
yeah.
does when we haven't done yet, it does feel so scary to do for the first time, maybe the second time, maybe even the third time, but to continue to have that encouragement, that modeling, and that just like honestly, like almost like a visual reminder to keep practicing on what it means to show up as yourself. And I think as what I've seen most of my clients experience is in the beginning, it's really scary and they're trying and it feels like they're stumbling, but actually usually happens much faster than they expect, where they start to realize that, oh my God, I'm actually more embraced and
Mm,
more accepted. That respect that I've been craving for years from my family, like it's showing up now in one conversation because they are able to be more of themselves in that moment, and bring that version of themselves into that communication. So I think the gift is actually recognizing it's twofold. It's one, it's that freedom for yourself to not have to second guess how you're showing up, how you said something to someone, how someone else said something to you, but also like you are giving people around you permission to show up as well. And it just makes communication so much smoother, for especially if the person across from you is someone you care to communicate with. If you don't, that's another conversation that we can talk about. You do not have to talk to that person in that case. Yeah. I do want to
yeah.
share one. I'll give a shout out to my dog, which I know dogs and humans have different rules
Yes.
and norms that they live by, but it's just like this dog, I tell him not to do 80 million things and he's still going to do it and life is fine and he's
Mm,
enjoying himself, and eventually we learn to like just enjoy his antics as well. I think that is actually like a little capsule of what it could feel like for humans as well. It's like, yes, there's going to be a little friction, there's going to be a little disagreement, and that's normal, that's okay. But if you stick with it in a respectable way, of course, not like in a way that disrupts everyone's lives around you, but just like, you know what, I have a genuine need right now. I need to be seen. I need to be heard. I need to interrupt you a bit. I need to share my personal story, whatever it is you've identified as needing, to go for it and to try it out. And that way you give yourself and your body the chance to gain that evidence of like, it's out, it's okay. And something I say a lot is, before we ask other people to accept us, we actually have to learn to accept ourselves first, and that's the only way to really gain true belonging and true acceptance.
yeah. Okay. We don't have that much time, but I have a big
Oh my
question.
gosh.
Because you said that, and like the first thing that popped into my head that I'm sure, a lot of our clients ask us, or just anyone listening might be thinking, is just like, okay, but how do I even start to accept myself? Like, what, like,
Mm,
that's such a big thing to say. And people
yeah.
are always just like, like self love, all the stuff. But like, what does that even mean?
Like, what am I loving here? What am I giving grace
Yeah,
to?
or like what's a practical way
Mm,
to actually practice that? Because it's like so easy to say it. But if you don't even
mm,
know what it means, then I think all you can do is say it.
yeah, yeah,
And how do you move past that?
yeah. I mean, this feels, not feels, this is actually kind of interesting that you brought it up because it is something that I get asked often, which is like, how do I know what's me if everything I'm doing is not anymore? There's like no real, I guess the word is benchmark to like reference back
Mm,
to. And there's an exercise that I do with, I would say most of my clients, especially if authenticity is a big part of their journey and a crucial like stepping stone and foundation for them to get to the goals and other things that they want to achieve through coaching, is an essence exercise where we actually ask the people around us to reflect back to us, what do they see? What do they see? What do they experience? Sometimes it's not always something tangible, but I would say trust that whoever you come across, you're leaving some sort of mark. You may not be aware of what that is, but you're leaving an impact on the other person. And when we have been living for years of our lives being really busy of trying to present ourselves a certain way, we're actually no longer the person reliable to identify what that essence is, which is why for the essence exercise I do with clients, we bring in people around them to be like, can you reflect back to us? What do you see when Ashmi walks in the room? What do you experience when Ashmi's gone from a room? So you understand both the absence and the presence.
mm,
And I think that starts to give people at least a starting place of a few keywords to describe what did they uniquely bring when they come into a room. And at first, it feels nebulous. It's a set of words, but it does, when you get those words, the thing I always see back from the clients is this like deep sense of relief of just like, oh my God, I feel seen. Like I have words to describe myself now. But the journey is much longer after that, right? It's like, okay, now I have this description of myself, but how do I turn it into conversations? How do I turn it into opportunities? How do I turn it into when do I choose to rest or not rest as well? So I think in the beginning, if it feels really elusive to you, it is actually okay to ask trusted people around you to reflect back to you, what do you see about me? And gather that evidence. And then you do the vetting of its own. Like if something doesn't feel in alignment, then you are the authority in that. You are the expert. So put that aside and keep the things that truly feel like language for you to describe yourself to the next new person that you meet. And then from there, it's just muscle development, flexing and showing up as yourself on an ongoing basis. Yeah. But
yeah.
how about you, Ashmi? Do you do anything that supports them in that?
Um, One, I love that exercise. It's a good one. And I remember the first time I had to do it, I was so uncomfortable asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
But then, one, it was like lovely and a surprise how quickly people gave it to me. Like, people didn't have
Yeah.
to think about it. The people, because I
Yeah.
asked people I'm really close to, and it was pretty instantaneous for them to send me responses. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what helped me believe it because I was like, oh, they didn't have to like sit there and like come up with something. Like
Mm-hmm.
they were busy and they were still able to like send me a couple sentences.
Yeah.
So that like the part of us that finds it hard to believe when people say nice things to us, like there is evidence to help it more be a little more believable when you're at the beginning of your journey.
Yeah.
Um, but when I was talking to you, or when I was listening to you, the other thing I thought of was accepting parts of ourselves that we don't like,
Oh,
or
yes.
right, because I do think that's a big part of the journey is
Mm-hmm.
because something I talk about with my clients a lot is radical self acceptance, and they're just like, what does that
Mm-hmm.
even mean? And I'm like, the idea of radical self acceptance is accepting every part of yourself, and even being okay saying like, I don't like this part of myself, but it is a part of me right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that gives you the freedom and the agency to like you said, do what you want to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And also just accepting that there are always going to be parts of ourselves that we don't like. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just like a part of being a human being.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, especially I work with, like a lot of people pleasers, a lot of people that have been masking themselves for a really long
Mm-hmm.
time. So this idea of just like showing up as yourself is one,
Feels
like
foreign.
scary and really
Hmm.
foreign, and it's gonna take time feeling safe enough to do that. And sometimes it feels like apathy
Hmm.
because you're like, what do you mean? Like, I'm just going to say, like, oh, that's just the way I am, like, all the time. And I like to, I like to say that, like, just because you're accepting a part of yourself doesn't mean that you're going to stop working on it or working on yourself.
Hmm.
Right? Like, it almost frees you up and gives you more energy to do the personal development and become the person you want to be,
Hmm.
because there's this quote or saying I see all the time that I love that's just like, if being hard on yourself worked, it would have worked by now, right? Like, if
Yes.
being hard on yourself and being mean to yourself worked, then I think by
We should
now,
all be perfect by now.
but we're not. So maybe we try
Hmm.
another way. And maybe that other way that I like to present to folks is radical self acceptance,
Hmm.
because it is the more loving and generous way to get where you want to be, and to also be okay with the journey, because you're never going to go 0 to 100,
Hmm.
but like you do
Yeah.
want to be peaceful and happy at the 20%, the 30%, 40%.
Yes.
And then when you
Yeah.
go back to 20% one day, like it's not a
Yeah.
linear path either.
Yeah.
And I think when I'm helping people on their journey to authenticity, like myself included, that has been a game changer.
Yeah. That acceptance of like, hey, it's not going to be linear. I don't have to be 100% the best version of myself all the time. And in fact, that is authentic to not be 100% all the time. And to like continue to ask for support and find those spaces, like be discerning, like it being ourselves after decades of not can feel very vulnerable. So finding those spaces and individuals where we feel safer with and ask them for support on the way of our journey is probably one of the last suggestions I would give for today. Yeah.
Yeah. And as we're wrapping up, if you're still listening, if you're still here, or you're back for the replay, uh, I would love to like challenge you to do the essence exercise
Mhm.
or sit with some of that radical acceptance. And if you want some accountability or just want to share, like we would love to hear from you in our DMs.
We
Like
do.
I, yeah,
Yes.
I love hearing people's aha moments or their insights, or even if you have
Mhm.
questions. But yeah, I do think I challenge you to do one of those, either like sitting with parts of yourself or doing the essence exercise, because
Mhm.
they're both good starting points on this journey. Or if you're already there, they're great for midpoint or like wherever you are. And
Yeah.
yeah, and we'd love to hear about it or see how they went.
And again, if you're still here, you're watching the replay, like this, I hope this is the first of many conversations that Ashmir are going to have on the topic of authenticity. You might have seen us sneak in a little authenticity amplified series. We do hope to have more of this because this is a very big question to answer, and we're not going to answer it all within an hour. But we just wanted to start opening up the doors of like, how do we define this? What gets in our way? And then we're going to have more nuanced topics as we go along. So definitely stay tuned and follow us.
Yeah. And if there's anything in particular you want us to talk about or cover,
Yes, please
send
help
us
us out.
suggestions. Yeah,
Send us
we would love to hear about that.
suggestions.
And then we'll make sure to send you an invite to the day that we decide to talk about it.
Yes, definitely. But appreciate everyone for staying. And if you are watching this at any point, if there's something that you felt like would be a great suggestion, or something you want to hold accountable for, like leave that in the comments and like invite everyone else into this journey with you as well. But thank you for joining, and we will see everyone soon. Bye.